Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week on the show, we had the lovely pleasure of being joined by a Star Wars High Republic author, George Mann, who kicks off Phase 3 Trials of the Jedi with his book, The Eye of Darkness. And Sarah, I just gotta say, we are so back, baby.
We are so back, baby, because this book covers all of the characters that we have missed for the past year and a half and that we have been thinking about every other day. And I'm still traumatized by Phase 1. It's fine. We're back in it, and I don't know. We're here. It's a good time.
Who do we got on the roster today, Sarah? Who do we got? We got Avar Kriss.
Elzar Mann.
We got Porter Angle.
Bell.
Marchion Ro. Gira Starros. Yeah.
Lena So.
They're all back. They're all back, baby.
Back. Yeah, and it was so much fun to have George on the podcast for this book. This is his first time on the podcast, and we're really delighted to have him for this book because we love it so much. And we just got to dive into all these characters, to get to talk about his process of writing, across the phases of the High Republic, and this being his first adult novel in the High Republic. We dive into a lot of really great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're familiar with some of George's previous work, he wrote Myths and Fables, Dark Legends. In the High Republic, he's also done Showdown at the Fair, which is one of our favorites because it is a sticker book with Buryaga on the cover, I believe. And he also wrote Quest for the Hidden City and Battle of Jedha in Phase 2. So it was really awesome seeing him write the adult novel to kick off things for Phase 3. So, and a big disclaimer up front as well, there is a point in the episode where we do start talking spoilers about the end of the Eye of Darkness in terms of where certain characters end up in the story and how the book sort of wraps up. So some pretty, not too specific, but enough specific that you would kind of get the general gist of certain moving pieces that you might not want to know about. So Sarah does disclaim that in the interview. Sarah, any other thoughts on that before we get started?
Yes, there's a point where George says, "How far into spoilers are we getting?" And we say, "We'll warn the audience." This is us warning the audience that when he says that, there will be spoilers.
Yes. But if you have read the book, this is going to be a really fun interview. So make sure you stick through the entire thing because there is just so much baked into this. And if you're excited for the rest of Phase 3, we do get a fun little tease at the end that you may want to stick around for. So stay tuned for that. So without further ado, Sarah, let's jump over to our conversation with author George Mann. George, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It is a big week for you. Not only your first Star Wars adult novel, but also one that kicks off the beginning of the High Republic Phase 3 Trials of the Jedi. Eye of Darkness is on bookshelves. How are you feeling this launch week?
Relieved, exhilarated, happy. It's been a great week, to be honest. It's, obviously a book like this you work on for a long time. So, behind the scenes, the book's been done for a while and I've been anxiously waiting to see how it's going to be received. And, my socials went crazy on Tuesday when the book hit. And just everyone's been so kind and so, and seems to be enjoying the book. And that's the best feeling because that's why we do this, so we write for the books to be read and hopefully enjoyed by the audience. So it's been fans seem to be embracing the book and embracing me, which is lovely. So there's a little bit of relief in there and excitement and joy, it's a lovely end to incredible week, actually.
Yay. I'm so glad. And I will say, as a fan, I was like, I'll read 100 pages tonight. That's what I'll do tonight. And I read the last 300 pages in a single go. So,
wow.
Yeah, I was listening. So I wasn't I was doing a puzzle at the same time. And I just was like, no, another chapter. And then we're at the end of the book. So it was definitely a really
hooting and hollering over here.
Fun ride.
They're just short enough chapters where you're like, just one more. And you can just do that for the whole book.
I learned that from thrillers, actually. That's thriller writers do that. They have these short, punchy chapters. One of my favorite writers, Mike Craven, these chapters are like, 1 or 2 pages. And sometimes they stop in the middle of a scene and then the scene carries on in the next chapter. But it really works the trick because you're turning the pages. So part of what I wanted to do with this book. I mean, partly it's because there's so many POVs in the book to juggle. But also it really helped to be able to kind of go like one scene at a time, do a scene per chapter, and it just helps drive the pace through the book. So it's great to hear that it's actually worked as well.
Very effective.
Definitely.
For me.
Yeah.
When we have anybody on, we love to ask them about like your first introduction to Star Wars and what brought you to this galaxy far, far away, and what makes you stay in this galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, it's a galaxy that I've loved since I was a very little kid. Over 40 years now, scarily. But I don't have very, very many memories from kind of being around the age of 4. But one of them is that my grandfather took me to see The Empire Strikes Back, and because he used to take me to the cinema a lot. So kind of a lot of my memories of him, and he was a wonderful man, and he died when I was quite young, but I have very fond memories of him, and a lot of them are centered around the cinema and going to the cinema. And Empire Strikes Back was one of those movies. And following, I mean, I remember kind of sitting there going, like looking up at the spaceships, but R2-D2 really stuck in my head as a kid. It just, I mean, George Lucas was a genius for what he did, making those films work on so many different levels. And for me, R2-D2 was just like, oh my goodness, I want an R2-D2 unit, and my parents got me the action figure, and then that started, a craze of buying more and more action figures. My dad really enjoyed Star Wars as well, so he bought the sticker books. Like, I don't know if we have Panini stickers over here, and I guess you might have Merlin sticker books. I don't know if they're the same sort of thing where you buy blind packs of stickers and you stick them in an album. So we had sticker books of Star Wars, and my dad would kind of every night coming home from work, he'd bring home a packet of stickers, and we'd go and he had an album too, and we would put the swaps in his album, and build them both up. And then my cousin had action figures as well, so he would come to visit occasionally, and we would play with our action figures. So from that point on, I guess one of the things I've always loved about the Star Wars universe is it feels like a real universe where you can tell your own stories in it. It always has, irrespective of being a writer. As a child, being able to kind of go, oh, I'm going to tell my own stories about these characters, or get my action figures behind the sofa and make some scenery, and and I think that's one of the reasons I've stayed with it so long. Going on as an adult to read books, to kind of watching the other movies when they arrived, and still collecting toys, to be honest, as well.
Same here.
Also same. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the wonderful thing about Star Wars, though, is that mythology keeps building itself and keeps growing. And I think that's what's so special about what you and the rest of the Luminous authors are doing with the High Republic, is because it is so distant from what we know. You can play with those action figures however you want. You can really do what you want in that sandbox. So considering, you've written a lot of stories in Star Wars across different eras too, not just the High Republic, but like, what do you feel is the core appeal of the High Republic from a creator standpoint, and also like you being a longtime Star Wars fan, and like, why does this body of work engage? Why do fans engage so positively and passionately about this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess there are lots of different answers, and if we knew it, we could bottle it, and because it's bottled lightning, isn't it? It's that thing. But I think it's to do with, it touches on what you said about mythology and kind of, but I think it's because it's new, but it also feels like Star Wars. So it kind of feels true to Star Wars. It feels like a Star Wars story that's being told, or lots of Star Wars stories that are being told in this kind of this sandbox. But it also has a freshness and newness to it. A bit like when we first saw the prequel movies, and it was like, the spectacle of it. Like we've gone back in time. We're seeing this different era. There were more than one Jedi, and I think it's a bit like that. It's a bit like, we're doing something slightly different with the villains in particular. We don't have red lightsaber wielding Sith, as cool as they are, and as much as I love writing those guys, one of the things I think is great about the High Republic is that we didn't go down that route. We kind of went, no, we're going to do something very, very different. We're going to do chaos versus order. chaos as exemplified by Marky and Rowe, and order as exemplified by the Jedi Order and the Republic. So I think it's a very different type of Star Wars story, but it still feels like Star Wars. And it's what George Lucas did was create a modern mythology with Star Wars. Like, I love folklore and I love the mythological tales, and that have come out of history. And I think what Star Wars is a modern version of one of those. So it's a framework of great heroes and great villains and great moral stories and cautionary tales. That's why that's why we did the Myths and Fables books. That I think worked well on that level. And I think the High Republic is that written large. It's adding depth and more mythology to the ongoing Star Wars universe and enriching it. But I think there's also a kind of thing, a lot of people have been saying this week about, with Eye of Darkness, you've put us through the ringer. What are you doing to these characters? One of the cool things about it is you don't know who's going to live or die. And as a reader and as a fan, that's really exciting because, as joyous as it is to be able to write a story about Luke Skywalker or Qui-Gon Jinn, I've recently been working on a Qui-Gon Jinn story. I mean, that's brilliant to get my hands on Qui-Gon Jinn, but he's going to be alive at the end of the story. Of course he is. We know his life and death story. So this is a snapshot into his life, and you hope writing a story like that you can help shed more light on that character and deepen that character. But the stakes aren't quite the same as is Elzar going to make it? Is Avar going to make it? What's going to happen to Porter after where we've left him? So that jeopardy adds something, I think, for readers as well.
The answer is stress. It adds stress to the the amount of time I spend up at night, like, oh my God, where are they? What are they doing? And to finally be reading them again and being like, okay, this is what Avar's doing. This is what Elzar's doing. This is what Belle's doing. And then being like, okay, now I finished the book. Back to waiting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's one of the most fun parts about the High Republic. Like, despite how tragic it is, there is a lot of hope in it. But also, we've kind of all, as a fandom, like embraced the meme of like, "What have you done, George? What have you done, Cavan? What have you guys done?" And we always say that with like as much love as possible, because the fact that we even feel that passionate and we care for the characters that much speaks volumes. So thank you for all the pain and the hope you bring.
But what's great about that, as from our perspective as creators, is you know how much people care about these characters. You want to do your best work. You want to tell the best stories you possibly can and be true to these characters for people, because you want them to carry on that love, and you don't want to you don't want to let people down. So I think it helps us raise our game as well.
You have written with Star Wars before, of course, and we've read these stories, and whether it be Myths and Legends or the 8x8 kids books that I love in Phase 1, or the Battle of Jeddah, we've seen many stories from you. But what was it like kind of joining the High Republic group of authors and doing all of those stories across the eras? And what kind of lessons did you learn from your past works in Star Wars and in the High Republic that you brought into this adult novel?
Good questions. So my history with the High Republic comes from originally from Dark Legends. So the series of books, Myths and Fables, Dark Legends, Life Day Treasury, and so I was
Speaking
writing.
Of which, happy Life Day, by the way. Just gotta shout that out while we're here. I've been working on the Dark Legend stories for a little while when Mike Siglain contacted me and said, "We want you to do an extra story that's linked to the High Republic with the Drengir." And actually, it ended up being the first published piece of High Republic fiction. It kind of snuck out there. But in the process of that, kind of Mike said, "Oh, look, what I'm going to do," because you work closely with Lucasfilm, you build that trust up. He said, "I'm going to send you all the documents about High Republic Phase 1, so that you can read all the background and the story that we're developing. Partly so you can write this story, but also read it all and take it all in, because at some point I would like you to join the team."
So I was kind of, super excited at that point. And as a fan, I was getting a bit of an inside track. So I got to, to read the work that the original 5 architects had done, and to read the manuscripts as they were being written as well, as the first and second drafts came in of books. Especially, as I started to adapt some of those elements into the 8x8 storybooks. So it was a lot of fun kind of touching in on that. And then the time came for Mike, he said, phase 2, we're going to open things out. And we're going to have a few extra writers. George, you're already primed, so you're on the team if you want to do it. Of course I want to do it. So then we started to kind of look at what projects would suit me. And, I'd written a lot of adult novels before. That's my background. But I'd obviously written middle grade, or at least all ages, Star Wars with the Myths and Fables books. So doing the first middle grade book of phase 2 seemed an obvious choice. I also had a history writing audio drama. So again, it was a kind of like, out of the people on the team, myself and Cav were the people who had a background in writing audio drama. So it was, again, an obvious choice to go, right, well, Cav did the last one, you do the next one. So I loved writing those stories and exploring those. But I guess in terms of lessons, I'm not sure there's lessons as much as decisions and opportunities that came with writing the adult book for phase 3, because it's a broader canvas. So with a children's novel, you're obviously writing. I never want to write down to children, but you're writing in a kind of more a simple story with clearer kind of moral structure to it, and shorter chapters and simpler language, and you don't have as much space to kind of expand and really go deep into characters. And it's very similar with an audio drama, because an audio, a bit like a comic, is a collaborative exercise. What you write isn't for end consumption, although people obviously do read the script book. But with a comic, what you're doing is you're writing for the artist, and then it's your dialogue that makes it to the end. But the artist interprets that, and it's the same with actors interpreting characters for audio. So you leave a lot of the characterization to the actors to bring to the character. So it's not so much on the page; it's the collaboration of the script with the artists who are performing it. With a novel, it's all you. It's very personal, and you have a much more space. I think Battle of Jeddah is probably something around 60,000 words. This is, I think, I've done this 115,000 words, something like that. So you're talking nearly twice the length, and 4 times the length of one of the children's books. So you're getting kind of really, you've got that space. And while I wanted the book to be action packed and have some good kind of Star Wars action sequences, some lightsaber battles, you've got to have that in a Star Wars story. I really wanted it to be an opportunity for it to be a deep dive into characters, a character study of these core kind of representatives of the different factions in the High Republic. So I got to spend a lot of time in the heads of people like Elzar and Avar and Porter and Gira, and Bell, which was brilliant. It was a brilliant opportunity. So I guess rather than a lesson, it was kind of, you play to the format you're writing in. And in that case, it was kind of like, okay, well, this is a chance for me to say some of what I want to say about Star Wars, and to kind of really explore how these characters are feeling at the start of this phase.
You did a great job getting into the characters' minds, and for Sarah and I, we were very excited for the specific points of view that were chosen throughout. But we also love the amount of like world building that you did, and sort of the geopolitical climate of the galaxy at this time between the Storm Wall and what's going on with the Senate and the Guardian protocols. All those things have kind of built up to this point. How would you describe the beginning of phase 3? Because there is a lot going on in a galaxy far, far away. And what tone did you and maybe the rest of the crew want to establish for the beginning of this phase, and making sure that comes across the page as well?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll take credit for the writing, but I can't take credit for the whole geopolitical context of it. That's a team effort. We're a writing room, and we all work very closely together and plan the stories across, the trilogy of adult novels, the trilogy of YA novels, etc. And we're thinking about how everything interrelates. So yeah, we discussed it a lot, and I think it was, we wanted to show the Jedi at the lowest ebb, I suppose. Although certainly the characters at the lowest ebb, not necessarily the Jedi, but they've lost. The Republic and the Jedi have lost at this stage, and what's more, it's been a year since we saw them last, and in that year, they've not had any other successes. Or any successes they've had have been minor. Like Markian Ro segmented half the galaxy, a big chunk of the galaxy. He has a weapon that can kill the Jedi, which means they've gone from being these figures who can do anything, like these super heroic figures who represent kind of peace and justice and protection for the entire galaxy, to running scared and retreating to Coruscant. So that puts them in that puts you immediately in an interesting place as a writer, because you're looking at kind of heroes who are running scared. I think that's the political climate that we're in when we approach Eye of Darkness. It's Markian Ro he's not just kind of done the great disaster with the Legacy run. He's not just attacked the fair at Velo. He's not just dropped Starlight Beacon into this ocean of Irem. He's also segmented a chunk of the galaxy and shown the Jedi to be not what everyone thinks they were. That's how everyone feels. So from that point on, it's this is the dark night of the soul of the High Republic. If you look at that kind of classic story structure, and we've not necessarily talked about it in those terms, but if you think like the Save the Cat style terms, that's the point we're at in the story here. It's the lowest ebb. It's the and from here, surely things can only get better. You'd hope.
We hope, but we
hope so.
don't know.
You'd hope. I'm saying
I don't know.
We'll wait and see.
Everyone's gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel so good after reading the prologue in this one, and a special shout out to the line "Fear could bring down the stars." That made me feel something deep inside, and I gotta wonder. Both of our ears perked up as big Roth's novelization fans, thinking love could ignite the stars, and then going to fear could bring down the stars. So that path feels bad. A little less hopeful.
No, I mean, I was pleased with when that line appeared, because I was just writing as you do, and it's like, oh no, okay, no, Starlight Beacon and the stars, and it's like, ooh, that's meaty. But yeah, I mean, again, that prologue tells you something about the state of the galaxy at that point. He's got a Grandmaster in a cage. It's a pretty bad situation. And the fact he, I don't know how far we're going with spoilers in the conversation. So, but
we'll warn our listeners one way or the other here. So.
Okay, so the fact that he then executes a Grandmaster, it's like it's another escalation. It's like we've seen him kill Jedi, we've seen him kill Jedi Masters. Now we've seen him kill a Jedi Grandmaster, and even he couldn't really. I mean, he tried pretty hard, but he didn't manage to stand up against the Nameless. So, the Jedi are right to be scared of him.
Right. Yeah. And that was, I think that was chapter 11. Didn't feel so good. That's one that I'm going to think about for a couple. There's a few chapters where every once in a while I just go, oh. And it's like chapter 18 in Shadowfall, or the last chapter of The Rising Storm, chapter 11 of this book.
Yeah, I've had quite a few people have dropped me a message going, chapter 11, man. It's like, well, I remember actually when Tessa Grattan, who's obviously one of the writers, I was reading the first kind of draft of Pass of it, and I remember getting a text from her going, oh my God, I've just read that scene. Oh my God. I was like, oh, this is, I think I might be on something good here if that's happened.
Definitely. I was like, okay, I see what he's up to. I see what our characters, where they're at, and know what the stakes are at this point. Okay, I'm on this journey, as it is.
When you've made it is when people know the chapter number specifically. That's because it's seared into their memory. They can't forget it.
I had it's the first time this has ever happened actually today. Someone posted a reaction shot of them reading the book and there were tears streaming down their face, and I felt a bit guilty.
Brad and I have a couple of those as we've been reading it, just over the years of us reading books together, of like selfie of us in this one moment. Oh my God. Yeah. So those are very real. They happen, I think, more often than maybe any of us know.
Yeah.
But we've been talking about some of the points of views that you've been able to dive into, and you got to touch on some great characters, fan favorites, and also some that we haven't seen a ton of point of view content for, kind of like Gira. We've seen a bit from her, but not as much as some of our other characters. What character were you most kind of eager and excited to write the perspective of? Is there anybody who proved to be more of a challenge to navigate through their brain? Are there any characters that you're super excited for fans who haven't picked up the book yet to read and discover in this story?
Ooh, good questions as well.
Sorry, that's like 3 questions in one.
It's fine. So I was very excited to get to write Burry, and no, I didn't actually end up writing anything from his point of view, because the role he's playing here is concerned friend for Belle. Really, Belle's gone out of his way in Charles's story and tells of light and life to save Burry, and Burry's obviously very grateful for that, but Belle's obviously no one's in a great place. Actually, probably apart from Burry, who's in a pretty good place in this book. I mean, he's still saddened by everything he's seeing, but he's alive and he's with his friends, and
he's just vibing. He's an empath. He's just having a good time no matter what. Yeah.
But not when people are feeling bad though. That's not how that works.
Oh yeah.
But Belle was a challenge actually to write because I wanted him to be angry, but also you've got to be careful with a Jedi who's angry. That's you don't see a lot of angry Jedi who aren't on a path to something dodgy really, and that's not Belle's path at all. Or certainly not at the moment. So that was a kind of a fine line to walk really, to kind of go, okay, how can he be angry and still be true to his kind of the Jedi Order and his Jedi roots, and I think that's where Burry came in as kind of the tool to use there as a writer, to be able to kind of walk Belle back. Anytime Belle got to the point where he's like, no, we're gonna, and he's about to do something drastic, Burry's there to go, just remember, it's okay, it's all right, we're Jedi, this is going to be okay, and that for me was a joy to write that relationship as well, particularly those moments where the two share a bit of a hug. So that was kind of both challenging and rewarding. I enjoyed writing Avar quite a lot as well, getting my hands on on Avar and showing her journey really, and because I think for me Avar's journey in the book is kind of indicative of what I think the Jedi need to learn in this phase, and that's about what we're seeing with the Jedi. They're not fractured; they're still the Jedi Order, but they're acting a lot as individuals. Like Yoda's like obsessed with, well, we've got to figure out the nameless problem. We can't do anything else until we've figured that out. To the extent he's even bringing Aslin back, much to the annoyance of some of the other members of the council. Then you've got Elzar, who is desperately trying to be a mix of Selen and Avar in their absence, and failing at both. And what he really needs to do is just to be himself. Elzar is good enough, but he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it about himself because of everything that's happened. And what Avar's doing is, she's stuck behind the occlusion dome, and she's not really trying to get out, and she's kind of hiding. She's like she's hiding from herself. She's hiding from her titles. The hero of Hetzel, the fact that, you know, Marshall Starlight Beacon, and she's kind of thinking, none of that worked. I did all these things and I failed at it. But what I do remember how to do is be a Jedi on a small scale and to kind of just do the right thing every day, to get up and do the right thing every day, which is admirable. And she's making a small difference to people's lives, but she's thinking that all these small differences are going to add up to a big difference, and they're not. They're not in the face of Markion Ro. And I think what Avar's journey in the book is that she has to remember that she needs to be a part of something bigger, and that she's got friends and support, and that if they work together, they can achieve more. And I think that's the relationship with Bellin, the Ugnaught, that really helps bring that out. And Bellin's one of those characters that I can't wait for people to meet, because he's not even in it that much, but he's like this little insightful guy who's like, he's a bit grumpy, and but he says things how they are, and he calls Avar out on this, and helps her see it. And then she hears that message from Elzar, and it kind of brings her around a bit, and it's just like, oh no, okay, I've got to step back into the fight, and that's how I feel like, you know, that's the lesson the Jedi need to learn. So that, I think, you know, they're the characters that I really, I mean, and Elzar as well. I mean, obviously, I loved writing Elzar. He's obviously not in a great place in this book.
He never seems to be doing particularly well.
No, but yeah, he's got a beard. You know, he's really grown it out.
But it's kind of like there's that interesting thing with the beard, which is like, you know, is he growing the beard out because he's just a bit of a mess and he's not looking after himself, or is it because he's trying to be too much like Stellan? And there's, you know, or it's a bit of both, isn't it? I mean, I think is what's going on. But yeah, I think a character like that is a blessing for a writer, because it's something to get your teeth into. You know, it's like, you know, a character who's happy all the time can be fun to write, but you can't really. It's hard to really go deep. But with a character who's kind of torturing himself like Elzar is, there's a lot to get stuck into, and that really allowed me to kind of really dig into him as a character. So, you know, I hope that comes across to people.
I think it was great to see. Well, I can't believe I'm going to say this sentence. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to myself for. It was great to see these characters struggle in a different way, because, you know, we know that Elzar has been struggling in various ways and dealing with that, and then we're seeing, you know, the aftermath of the Starlight Beacon fall. But Avar she's been the hero of Hetzal. She's been the Marshal of Starlight Beacon. She's been a bit of an untouchable figure in some ways, you know, around her titles. And then seeing the way that she does, as you mentioned, kind of get up every day and attempt to do something right, and attempt to just stay alive and stay hidden in this really kind of dangerous zone. But then realizing that her efforts are a momentary moment of reprieve, but not at the same level of, you know, being a hero of Hetzal or of the whole world or the Starlight Beacon. I thought that was super compelling and just a really captivating way to kind of just understand these characters better and give more layers to the Jedi, who, you know, every once in a while, as much as we've seen their faults over time, still have that sort of legendary status in, I think, the fans' eyes often. So yeah, there's no question at the end of this one. I'm just thinking about them. So sorry.
No, that's great to hear, because that's what I wanted to do. It's like they're just people, you know, they're people who can do extraordinary things. And I think it's very easy to forget. And I've written superheroes before, and I think it's very easy to forget that people who do extraordinary things, it takes a toll on them. You know, it's like, you know, you can't live your life dialed up to 11 all the time. And you know, and that's kind of what I really wanted to explore here. It's like, you know, these guys wake up every day and they're expected to save the galaxy. It's like, what's that going to do to you? And then especially, and it's fine when it's all going well, when it's easy, when everyone goes, oh, it's the Jedi, they've turned up, of course we'll do everything that we're told to do, and you know, but that's the opposite of where we're at, because actually, you know, Markion Ro has shown them that's not going to work. That's all the time. That they're not infallible. and so they're facing that infallibility quite starkly. Some of them for the first time, probably. And you kind of think about, well, how would I feel in that situation? It'd be pretty broken.
I think infallibility is maybe why we gravitate towards the High Republic era so much, because even though it was pitched as the Golden Age, it has been anything but the Golden Age, at least the bits that we've seen of it, with this big Nile threat and the Nameless threat and all that. But infallible characters in Star Wars, like Luke in The Last Jedi, like Obi-Wan in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, people who were often considered the best of us, like Avar, I think those sorts of stories really highlight like what the weight of expectations can do to a person, like you said, like turned up to being 11 all the time. But also just like speaks to their resiliency and how they bounce back. And that's why I love the moments for Avar throughout this book of just like, I've been through it. I've tried to hide, but I can't hide any longer. And I have to like kind of maybe not return to the legendary status like I was before, but enough of a version to inspire hope. Like much like Luke, right? Luke doesn't come to the Battle of Crate as like the super acrobatic guy who's taking down AT-ATs. He's just standing there, just enough of a symbol to mean something to people. And I think that's kind of what Avar's journey is here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just recognizing, I think like I mentioned earlier, it's like that. But I think that's the fundamental difference between the High Republic and the Skywalker saga is that they're not alone. They, and I think that's a big part of kind of the realization that they're all coming to towards the end of the book. It's like, actually pull together. We can do this. We can lean on each. We can be open and honest with each other, which is the strength that they have that Luke never had.
Absolutely. People who have each other in the heroes, there are also some characters in this book that at the end of the day have no one but themselves. And I would say that the Nile, Marsham Rowe, Gira, all of our friends, General Weiss, at the end of the day, the trust, the vulnerability is not there. And I think that, the storm wall is really fascinating because it poses this like very physical threat for our heroes. But it also, is kind of a metaphorical threat. And it also serves to isolate both parties, our heroes and our villains. What do you feel is motivating Marsham Rowe in this book? And how great are the threats against the Jedi compared to what they've had to face before, despite, the faults of the Nile?
I think Marchion is a fascinating villain, and because he's so unpredictable. One of the things I didn't want to do a lot in the book was get inside his head. I wanted to show his effect on everyone else, but not actually spend much time inside his head, because a bit like, if you write Sherlock Holmes, you need to see it from Watson's point of view, because if you're inside Sherlock Holmes' head, you're in the head of a genius. And that's very hard to portray effectively. And with Marchion, I think he's most effective when you don't know what he's going to do next. And what was really interesting to me about in the writing of this book, whenever I write a book, there's always a pivotal moment where I write something and it almost unexpectedly clicks, and I go, that's what this book's about. That's the theme of this book. Some books it happens early, some books it happens right at the end, and you look back and you go, oh wow, okay, I've just written a book about X, Y, or Z, and I didn't realize that's what I was doing. With this book, it was about halfway through, and it's the moment when, and it's quite a quiet moment. It's the one moment when Marchion drops his guard and he's talking to Gira, and he says, what the Jedi haven't learned yet is that to win, you have to become your enemy, and by becoming your enemy, you lose. And that's his big admission, that he's at sea, because he's won everything he thought he wanted. He brought the Jedi to their knees. He segmented this section of galaxy, but actually all he's done is build himself a prison, just of his own design. Because you've got Gira, who understands that the Nile are failing in the sense of, they're not necessarily failing in terms of what Marchion wants, but they're failing in terms of any kind of structural government to look after all these people that they've put inside this occlusion zone. And that's not going to end well. There's billions of people on hundreds of worlds locked inside the exclusion zone, and if there's no infrastructure, they're going to rebel. They're going to die. It's and it's going to be their fault. So Gira knows that to survive this, and she's obviously thinking from a very selfish point of view as well. To survive this, we have to turn into a government. We have to, she's got rid of the Tempests, and she's formed ministries. She's lying to Coruscant about how everything's really swanky behind the storm wall. Everyone's really happy, and we're very efficient, and we let's do a deal. Let's have some, let's have a treaty between us. Well, that's not what Marchion Ro wants. He's an agent of chaos. He's it's the last thing he wants. He wanted to bring that down. He's an anarchist, and literally nihilist. So he's lost in this book. I think he's in the sense like he doesn't know what to do next. So why I think he's doing things like, well, let's execute a Jedi Grand Master and broadcast it. He's pushing and pushing and pushing to try and get reaction, or constantly trying to get reaction. Oh, okay, I'll make the storm wall expand, get a reaction, because that's what he wants. He wants chaos. He wants fighting. Doesn't want peace. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how his story develops now from here, and how that relationship with Gira develops. They're lovers, but they're obviously not quite comfortable in each other's presence anymore. Not quite happy with each other's politics and machinations. So that's interesting. But yeah, I think that's what makes Marchion so scary as well. Because what's he going to do? He doesn't want to be a figurehead of a government.
No,
Mm-hmm.
Nor do I
Not
want
at
him
all.
to be a figurehead of the government.
We've all had that type of government recently.
Yeah, he's a bit of a reactionary. He likes to show force when he can, and then recede back into his sort of his throne and his in the comfort of his tower. Literally shaped like he's got like a window like that's shaped like an eye now, which for me made me think of Emperor Palpatine in Return of the Jedi with his window and his chambers. And I'm just like, yeah, Marchion's at a point where he's just got to sit back, pull a couple strings here and there, and he doesn't want to go beyond that. He doesn't want to keep pushing it too much. He wants to push it a little bit, like you said, to get a reaction out of people. And he's just kind of a jerk.
But I think that's the thing. It's like, so you when you're kind of doing something like this, one of the great things about the year's jump from Fallen Star to this is it allows you to reintroduce everyone and where they're at as a writer, but it also, you're introducing the status quo. This is the new status quo of the galaxy. And actually, status quo isn't a thing that exists in Marchion's head. He doesn't want a status quo. He wants everything to be in flux all the time. And if you kind of think that about him, then that's to me is a lot more scary than an Emperor Palpatine, because it's like, Palpatine, what his goals are. He wants to rule the galaxy, and he'll be happy when he's ruling the galaxy. He can sit on his throne and have all his, Sith and and his stormtroopers and just lord it over everyone. That's not Marchion, right? So, I think that's kind of some of what I wanted to try and communicate of what was going on in the Nile camp, and what Gira is the kind of the viewpoint character to kind of show us through that, and Real a little bit as well.
I think it was great to have Gira as like the viewpoint character, as somebody who comes from the world that we know and the world that we I think as readers hope that our story ends up back in, which is like structure and peace and trying to inject some order into the chaos, and then in turn she reveals that chaos in Marchion, which I think is very clever. And Yeah, I also just really enjoy the politics of Star Wars, which is not always a popular opinion for some. But for me, I was like, yes, give me the politician point of view. I want to see how she's thinking about it and how she sees the future. Yeah, and it kind of reveals the cracks of the whole system, which is great.
Very cool.
Yeah, some of the best conversations are between Lena So and Gira. They're just so good.
Well, thank you.
And not only like is Gira and Marchion having their own machinations throughout this book and their own motivations, but also General Weiss, who's back. We met her in The Blade by Charles Soule in Phase 2, and we know that Porter is trapped behind the storm wall. So there's obviously a little bit of shared history there. What was it like for you to tee up that rematch of the century potentially, and
literally the century,
literally the century, yeah,
century.
150 years, I guess, later. And did you get to collaborate with Charles at all to kind of fill in, or bring Weiss back into the picture?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it was a lot of fun to do. I think there was a whole bunch of stuff going on there, really, because one of the things I really wanted to do with this book was to put some proper links back to Phase 2, so people see actually Phase 2 it was really fundamental. It's different. It was a step back. It was a big risk for us, but it's fundamental to what's going on in the now, and kind of Porter's story overall is the strongest link, because obviously Porter was alive back then, but that allowed me to kind of do the thing with the EX droid, but also the general was an obvious thing. And we work very closely as a team. So kind of me, Tessa, and Charles have been particularly talking about, well, the adult trilogy that we're working on, and I was teeing up a lot of stuff. So Charles has suggested General Weiss might be a character, Weiss of Weiss, and it's another Markian Martian.
It's all valid, I guess, at this point.
So that came from Charles' suggestion, but it just really worked for me, because I really wanted to build those Phase 2 links in, and it became like, well, if Porter is the gateway to that, we've got his kind of the stories, his remembrance of crashing the shuttle with Creighton, and the fact he's been going around trying to build this EX droid because he thinks it might be this outmoded technology that might help get through the storm wall. But then you've got his, nemesis, essentially, this, in General Weiss, making an appearance, becoming part of the Nile, basically sacrificing her entire world for power, to giving them up to the Nile, and saying, I'll buy my way into the Nile structure, and yeah, teeing up that rematch. It's been a long time in the making. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to do, and I loved Ryan Porter's storyline actually throughout the whole book. I love that he's in a different place to Avar. He's like he's not really looking to. I suppose he's reaching the end of his life. Really, he's thinking about I can do a lot of good here. People need me in the inclusion. I'm not trying to get out, but I need to get word out. And then when he finds out Avar's there, he's like, I need to get Avar out. I need to help. But he's not so much worried about getting out himself, because he knows there's things to do inside the occlusion zone, and taking on Weiss, stopping Weiss is part of that, which is that big action sequence at the end where he takes the drill ship into her ship and stuff. That was a lot of fun to write. So yeah, who knows where all that's going? I do, but I can't tell you.
Nor will we ask. We will just sit here and feel a little bit of panic at the fact that you know all the answers and we know nothing.
I don't know all the answers, actually. That's one of the great things about you talk about these things as a group of writers in broad strokes a lot of the time, and one of the other authors will still astound you in the way that they deliver it, something, or they write something, or So I can't wait to. I'm always looking forward to seeing what the next writer does in the next book.
So you've now gotten to write kind of characters in Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 of the High Republic. we have a fun little like speculative question, and then we can tackle the big theme question. Brad, I haven't forgotten about it. I just wanted to do a little fun speculative question. If you could have one character from phase 2 and one character from phase 3 to sit down and have a conversation, who would you choose and what would they chat about?
It's a really good question. I think because I'm super fond of her, it would be Solandra's show. But I'd have a sit down with Ava,
Mm.
because I think there's some interesting parallels, and some lessons that could be learned there. One of the things about Solandra is her, she carries a shield. She doesn't need to carry a shield. No Jedi needs to carry a shield if they've got a lightsaber, but she chooses to carry a shield. So that immediately tells you something about her as a character, and her development over the stories I write in phase 2, and the particularly the short story in Tales of Light and Life as well, is about recognizing how symbolic things can be, very powerful, and give you a philosophy as well. And I think she could teach Avar something about how to wear those titles like Hero of Hetzel and Marshal of Starlight Beacon, and not have them be a burden, but have them be a strength. So I think that relationship would be really interesting to write.
That's a great answer.
Now I'm gonna go come up with like 10 headcanons about how their chats, because I'm really compelled by that. Yeah, yeah. Solandra, she has such an interesting and very, I think, unique perspective. It's really compelling.
I'm about to log on to AO3 and start writing that fic. Just be like, they're having brunch. What's going on? No, I gotta also shout out Shield of the Jedi in Tales of Light and Life, because that was such a wonderful story with Rupert, and getting to learn some Shield lore was especially fascinating, and how it's passed down. But I think the thing with like the Shield is you don't need it to be a shield. You don't need it to be the Shield. You can be the Shield without having it physically, on your hand. So, maybe that's something Solandra would share with Avar as well. That's a good lesson that I loved.
The thing, yeah, it's the idea of like a title can be a symbol and can guide you, but you don't have to wear it all the time to still embody what it means.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I guess as we start to wrap up, I want to point to hope being a core theme of this book, and we've alluded to it quite a bit. Despite it being called The Eye of Darkness, and the cover of the book is very foreboding, and we open with this very awful scene with Preta Vider and Marchion Ro and what's going on there. But at the end of the day, these stories are still always about hope. And characters on both sides of the storm wall are trying to find their hope. They're trying to overcome, the fear that they face. So, like, when it comes to hope and how you present it in this book, like, how do you feel that it weaves into the larger themes of Star Wars overall?
I think it is the theme of Star Wars. Actually, I think hope is underpins everything. It's the rebel movement is built on hope in Star Wars, and it's they're a tiny. I mean, look at Rogue One as a prime example. They're going against the odds all the time, but it's hope that carries them through. And I think what I wanted to do with this book was you start in a very dark place, but you have those seeds of hope, and that's what Avar is. That hope. Even though she doesn't realize it herself, she becomes a beacon of hope in the fact that she gets out and gets back to Coruscant. That's the hope the like flame that rekindles the Jedi's hope, because they go, oh, okay, someone's made it back. It can be done. She survived for a year in the Occlusion Zone. She's back, and she's, we can do this. We can do this together. But there's even little moments of hope that, like you mentioned, like people on both sides of the storm wall. It's a tiny thing, but there's a moment when Gira is basically shot down in what she's saying about building this kind of relationship with the Republic, and then another Nile takes her aside afterwards and says, I agree with you, and so do some of the others. I think what that's interesting in a political sense, and it's showing a bit of a fracturing, but actually for Gira, that's a seed of hope. That's a seed, okay, I'm not alone in this. There are people who will help me. And then you got, Rill and, Quith Meglar helping her. Now he's helping her for his own personal reasons. He's still a Nile. He's not a nice guy, but there are threads of hope in kind of every story within the book. Like Porter finding the droid, sending the droid out. That's another kind of moment of hope. And I think it's really important in Star Wars to have it. I think when you write something, this is one of the things that I think I've learned over the years writing for various different brands, like I've written for Doctor Who, or I've written Sherlock Holmes stories, or whatever it is. You've got to get the tone right. It's not so much there are specifics in the stories. There are people to help you with the specifics of a story always, but it has to feel like a Doctor Who story, or it has to feel like a Sherlock Holmes story, and in this case, obviously, it has to feel like a Star Wars story. And I think to feel like a Star Wars story, it has to have hope at its core. Otherwise, it's not going to feel like Star Wars. That's every Star Wars story that you kind of watch or read has that kernel in it. That's for me. It's absolutely fundamental.
Totally. Hope is like the sun. If you only believe in it when you see it, you never make it through the night, is one of my favorites from Last Jedi, and that is so true for our Jedi at this moment. It's like you gotta. Yeah. There's a kernel somewhere. You just gotta find it. It's like a needle in a haystack, but it is there.
Yeah,
no matter what.
It just need. I mean, with the Jedi in this book, they just needed a win. That's they'd had a year of banging their heads literally against the storm wall, and Elzar gets that moment where, because he's we got to fight, and he gets that moment, and that's crushing, absolutely crushing defeat when everything goes wrong and he sends those people to their deaths, and for him it just kind of just makes everything so much worse. But then getting Avar back at the end is that's the win they needed. So we'll see in the future stories how that develops. But for me, that was kind of it's quite a minor win in the grand scale of the galaxy at this point. But one Jedi escapes the Occlusion Zone. It's like it didn't. At one point I was kind of worried. Well, do we need a bigger win? Do we need a big victory then? And I thought, no, actually, it's enough because it speaks to the theme. Because it more so than any big lightsaber fight. I mean, there's obviously plenty of action in the run-up anyway, but it's a character moment, and that's for me, and it's about hope, and that was for me. That was a good enough kind of signing off point.
I think for me, and I speak for Brad in this one as well, as somebody who loves both Avzar. Now I've just put together their names. That's just where I'm going. Elzar and Avar. Seeing that moment of hope, I think was a big moment of relief and that hopeful feeling at the end of this book. I was like, oh, thank God, to see them back together. Because I think when we, began to hear some of the synopses of where we were at the beginning of phase 3, I was like, no, they're apart. Why would they do this to us?
So we can bring them back together, of course.
Right. And then we can feel that good feeling. So it happened. It worked. But looking towards the future, and we are asking for no details. We are no gotchas, nothing like that. But we know that you have Tears of the Nameless still upcoming, and we're really excited about it. And that's a part of the young adult trilogy of books, which we have also loved throughout all the phases so far. How exciting is it to know that you have another story coming up, getting to tackle, I would imagine, some new characters that for you, and then obviously some new characters as well as books go, and bringing that story to life next year.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's brilliant. I mean, I just don't want it to stop, is the truth. I'm having so much fun writing these books. Even at their darkest moments. There were I've given people 3 words about Tears of the Nameless, so I'll let you have them as well. Those 3 words are Wreath, Aslin, and Fear.
Those are our favorite words. Why would you say that to us right now?
Those are
I'm
our favorite words.
Sit here and anticipate.
But I think, for me, so Wreath, I'm not going to expand on what's in the book, but getting to write that character was huge for me, and it's what's great about switching from different formats in kind of the run is being able to switch those different subsets of characters. So we've done with Eye of Darkness. I've played with the toys. I've had Avar and Elzar and Marky and Roe and Porter. And what I'm doing now is switching to that subset of kind of YA characters, which is great. So I won't be satisfied until I've done everything.
All right, so we need to just kindly knock on Lucasfilm's door and be like, more, please.
I was gonna say the holidays are coming up. Maybe all the Luminous authors just need to pitch in and get like a really, really nice gift for Michael Siglain and just be like, Michael, there's some potential here for phase 4. Just kidding. we want to write more. Come
4
on.
through 8.
There's plenty of phase 3, believe me.
I've
seen all the titles. We're just
absolutely ahead of us, so we're really excited about that.
Yeah.
And yeah, we love these characters, and between all of the phases, and all of the age levels, and getting to dive into them, and it's hard when somebody asks you like, okay, I want to jump into the High Republic, what should I read? And I'm like, everything.
No. I mean, I hope people can read, different threads through the kind of stories without feeling overwhelmed, without feeling that they have to read everything. But obviously, we do wind everything together, so that for people who are reading it all, they get the maximum benefit. So I know there are a lot of people saying, "Oh, I haven't read phase 2 yet. Can I read Eye of Darkness after Fallen Star?" And I was like, well, hopefully it will make sense. I think I tried to catch people up on kind of what was relevant, but you're going to miss a lot of nuance and a lot of kind of you're seeing the origins of the Nile in phase 2. You're seeing threads that are going to play out in Eye of Darkness. So I hope people enjoy reading it all as well.
I've recently got a friend into it. She was like, I'm late to this. She read Light of the Jedi and was like, I'm in. What's next? Give it to me. Let's go. And so I think it might be a daunting start for some folks, when they see like the quantity of how many books have been released. But once you jump in, it's I would say it's pretty hard to stop reading the High Republic. There's a lot to uncover and enjoy. So thank you for being a part of that and bringing us these characters that we love so much back into our brains through this book. So
thank you for reading it. It's much appreciated.
Very last question, just to leave off on a note, not even just the High Republic, but overall, is just what has Star Wars meant to you as a creator, as a fan, just to send us off here.
Well, I think we've touched on it already. I think hope is a key factor, but more than anything, actually, it's family. Both kind of family and found family as well. I think there's a whole element of that in the Star Wars stories, and for me, in terms of family, it's something like that I've shared with, as I mentioned earlier, my grandfather, my own dad, and then as a dad, I've shared with my kids as they've grown up. So it's a generational love of Star Wars in the family, and shared moments together. But then also the found family element. That some of my very best friends have come from Star Wars, both as fans and as fellow creators, and I think without Star Wars, I wouldn't know some of these people, or wouldn't have had some of those key moments that I've had with family members over the years. So that's kind of what it means to me.
That's beautiful. I love that. Star Wars is family. Insert Vin Diesel meme from Fast and Furious. It's all about family.
But it's real. It's so real.
Yeah.
Not
it
just
is so
for the
real,
meme.
though. Yeah, I love that answer. And thank you for being a part of the Star Wars family, the High Republic family. We appreciate all the work that you've done, and can't wait for whatever's next. So thanks, George, so much for joining us and celebrating this very special Life Day together. Where can our listeners find you online, and what else do you have that's coming out that we maybe haven't alluded to or discussed yet?
So you can find me probably best at Instagram, at George Mann Author. It's mostly Star Wars because I've been so busy with Eye of Darkness and Tears of the Nameless. But there's the Qui-Gon graphic novel coming out as well. So hopefully people will enjoy that, and that's got some not so subtle links back to the Battle of Jeddah as well. So for people who've enjoyed that, there's a payoff there as well, which is isn't a spoiler because it's alluded to in the press release that Dark Horse put out. So yeah, I think that's it at the moment. It's all Star Wars, which is all good.
Very good. It was very good. So it's always a good call to get when you get to write more Star Wars. So we hope It keeps coming. Thank you, George, so much. And may the Force be with you.
And you.
Thank you again for joining us on this fun interview with George Mann. We hoped you enjoyed listening to it just as much as we enjoyed chatting with him. And we hope that you enjoyed The Eye of Darkness and will join us in our upcoming book discussion right here on the podcast feed because, boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Oh, yeah. We have so much to discuss, and I cannot wait. But if you want to know when that episode drops, make sure you're following us on all of our socials, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, you name it, as well as follow us on the podcast feed of your choice and subscribe to the show. Drop us a rating if you enjoyed it so other folks find the show as well and join on the High Republic discussion.
Our patrons help to keep the lights on here at Friends of the Force, and we're very grateful for them. So thank you to Ben, Brian, Cheryl, Clay, Deborah, Emma, Huang, Jennifer, Katie, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Logan, Lucy, Lindsay, Matthew, Rob, Saber Bouquet, Santa, Skytalker, Stephen, Tom, and Travis. We're really, really grateful for your support. And thank you to all of our High Republic friends and listeners across the galaxy who tune in and join us for these various High Republic discussions for Light and Life, my dear friends.
Absolutely. For Light and Life. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you to George and Del Rey for making this episode happen. And until next time, everybody, may the Force be with you always.